Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 6. It's Ellie's sad birthday flashback episode, and I love how this episode restructures flashback moments from the game into one arc that traces Joel going from proud papa to depressed daddy as he tries to do a little bit better than Lalo Salamanca. I'm going to explain the changes from the game in this episode and go through scene by scene to break down all the details you missed. And please head on over to nerdriot.shop where we have some great The Last of Us inspired designs, like Ellie's tattoo, this shirt. I love it. Grabbing one of these is the best way to support us here at New Rockstars. We open the episode in Austin, Texas, 1983. Young Joel is played by Andrew Diaz. Young Tommy is played by David Miranda. Joel says,
"It'll be fine."
Joel wears the same kind of plaid shirts he'll wear as an adult, and he shows the same protective instincts that he's gonna have throughout his life. Tommy had been buying weed and got into a fist fight and got arrested, which will surely make it back to their cop father, and Tommy worries he's gonna get the belt from their dad. And Joel says, "No, I will." Just like he's gonna be okay being beaten to death for saving Ellie. Tommy wears this Van Halen shirt from their 1982 tour with a sick lion and sunglasses, as this was called the Hide Your Sheep tour. Now, this is the 80s, so I don't know if it counts, but according to Tessa's code with Bill and Frank, 80s music means trouble ahead. And the production was able to secure the same powder blue Austin area police cruiser from the late 70s and 80s. I mean, you kind of have to get Austin production design right because the Keep Austin Weird movement loves to think that they've frozen the city in the Dazed and Confused era, and they will call bullshit when something ain't authentic. Tony Dalton, one of my favorite actors right now, who played the terrifying Lalo Salamanca in Better Call Saul and was given lesser material to work with in the MCU as Jack Duquesne, Swordsman, and Hawkeye in Daredevil Born Again, here plays Joel and Tommy's father. His name tag just reading J. Miller. So he could be Joel Sr., maybe Jimmy, maybe Joseph, we don't know. Just like Joel lies to protect Ellie, here he lies to protect Tommy, telling his dad that he was the one buying the drugs and Tommy ended the fight. But Joel has never been good at lying, largely because he has a violent side that causes his reputation to speak for itself. Tony Dalton is one of the best examples of just great casting on this series, because as a law enforcement officer in Texas, with Tommy so afraid of getting beaten, we just see him initially and think of Lalo Salamanca, that this is going to be a stereotypical alcoholic, abusive father. But then the way this scene unfolds just surprises us with the nuance of this character's humanity. He shares beers with Joel, and he tells Joel about how when he was 10, he stole a candy bar and his dad made him give it back and apologized to the cashier, and then his dad punched him so hard he broke his son's jaw. And that even deeper than this violent abuse, what lingers even into his adulthood, that probably even motivated him becoming a law enforcement officer, is the shame of having to have his mouth wired shut for 2 months and everyone knowing why. Joel's dad says,
"Okay, yeah, I've hit you. And I've hit Tommy, but never like that. Not even close. I mean, maybe I go too far. I don't know."
Whoa. So this right here is some real shit. And it's a kind of surprising, nuanced conversation that a lot of men start to have with their dads when they're older teenagers. Their dads start talking to them like adults, and you find out that your dad doesn't always have all the answers. There has been an evolving discussion in this country that few films and shows have been brave enough to take on. The question of child abuse versus discipline, where that line is, the difference between how our parents were raised and how we want to raise our kids, and whether doing a little bit better than our parents did is really enough to not be considered abusive, and how much we should judge our parents if in their minds they were just following the flow of traffic on this kind of thing and just trying to be a little more ahead of that curve, and our anxiety that things that we experienced when we were kids and things that we're putting through our kids now will be considered abusive 20 or 30 years from now. Yeah, it's a messy, complicated topic, and it's a space where The Last of Us has always lived, and I appreciate it compared to the moralizing a lot of modern titles do to prescriptively preach today's ethical standards to all past generations when it comes to child rearing. It's not that all fathers and grandfathers were callously cruel. I mean, some were, but a lot of them thought that they were doing better than what they got. And for better or worse, there is no denying that that left the modern generations to inherit a history of violence and generational trauma that we don't really know what to do with. So I appreciate the inclusion of the dad saying, "Not even close," then pause. I mean, maybe I go too far, I don't know, because that part of it is crucial. It shows that Joel's dad doesn't know where the line is himself, and even questioning whether a little better still isn't enough. He's realizing that for Tommy to be this scared of the belt, and for Joel to feel like he has to protect Tommy from their dad like this, that the shame that he felt is probably also being felt by Tommy and Joel. And so this dad gets emotional and says,
"But I'm doing a little better than my father did. And you know, when it's your turn, I hope you do a little better than me."
It's his way of saying, I'm too sinful to make it out of the desert into the promised land. And I don't know what's going to be considered sinful in the future, but maybe you'll figure it out. And he places a gentle hand on Joel's shoulder, and we see the watch. The same watch Joel will wear after Sarah fixes it up for him as a birthday present. In the pilot episode, she said this is one that she fixed.
Fixed it for you, and you were never going to do it for yourself. So
When Sarah dies, this will become the iconic broken watch that Joel will never take off, visible even in the moment of his death, and the watch that means so much to Tommy in episode 3, and the added moment in the show, the wait in the Jackson morgue. For Tommy, seeing that watch likely also reminded him of their father and the complicated feelings that he probably carries. And I have a feeling that next episode, we're gonna see how that father's influence also was inherited by Tommy. This series began on Outbreak Day, Joel's birthday, and this watch was Sarah's birthday present for him. And this episode extends that birthday tradition through Ellie's birthdays as Joel tries to make each of them perfect for her. And this episode kind of captures a snapshot of each of these birthdays, kind of like age markings on a wall, as we can see the changing relationship over time. The opening title puts Pedro Pascal back in the opening slide beside Bella Ramsey, and in the shot of the fungal stalks, the taller stalk is now back beside the Ellie stalk, as this will be a flashback episode that really completes the picture of Joel and Ellie's relationship. This episode was written by Neil Druckmann and Haley Gross and Craig Mazin. Druckmann and Gross already wrote much of the dialogue and narrative for The Last of Us Part 2 game, and since this episode largely just adapts a lot of that dialogue A to A, it makes sense that they would both be credited here. Neil Druckmann himself directs this episode. So we're now back just 2 months after Joel and Ellie arrived in Jackson in season 1, and Jackson's Tipsy Bison bar, where Seth is a bartender. The Tipsy Bison is the name of the Jackson bar in the game, and you can actually see the sign for the bar to the right in this shot. While there are signs for other booze brands still up, the actual bottles on the shelves have handwritten labels, as these would be scavenged liquors, maybe some homebrewed moonshine. But later on New Year's Eve, Tommy and Joel drink a bottle labeled whiskey, stocked since 2022. So they've gathered some good ones here. Joel trades a bag of Lego bricks that he found in a house by Hoback, one that Seth said that he also searched, but Joel knows where to look because, you know, when you play as Joel or Ellie or whoever in the game, you always look through every freaking drawer. Seth reveals that he was a cop with the Milwaukee PD before the outbreak, and Joel takes note of this as the son of a cop with complicated feelings toward a cop father. And we're gonna see how that affects something later on this episode. The trade is for a birthday cake for Ellie. And remember, in the pilot episode, Joel forgot to pick up a cake for his own birthday, which disappointed Sarah, and he promised to get her one the next day.
Where's the cake? Come on, man.
I'll get us one tomorrow.
Which is an important detail since we know the cordyceps spread through flour. If Joel had remembered to pick up the cake, they would have been infected. But this also tells us why Joel cannot wait for Seth to finish the cake for Friday. It has to be on the right day because Ellie's 15th birthday is a first father-daughter birthday he's gonna get to celebrate since losing Sarah. Joel checks Ellie's bedroom to make sure she's gone. The song we hear is Haven by Gustavo Santaolalla. Ellie has this photo of a young Kurt Cobain on her door. Over her bed, you can see the Savage Starlight poster that we talked about in season 2, episode 1. Joel got from Seth a bone. Looks like a femur, but I assume it's from a cow, not a human, since Seth works in the kitchens and, you know, we're not talking about like what David puts on the menu. And he shaves down this bone, a process that must have taken hours just to carve the tiny bone piece for the guitar. Because a detail that precise is important for someone who's gonna spend a lot of time on a guitar. Your skin rubs against that part as you strum. And he knows that part of Ellie's arm is also where she was bitten. And today is the day he'll also learn that's where she was burned. And in a couple of years, next year, she's gonna have the tattoo there. So it's so important that he spends so much time on this piece of bone because it's a sensitive part of Ellie's arm and he wants to make sure that's not gonna get chafed. We see a close-up on his watch as he carves Ellie's favorite image to draw, the moth, into the arm of the guitar. But in 2 years, he's gonna be initially upset when Kat uses a needle to etch this image onto Ellie's actual arm. Tommy brings in Ellie, who burnt her arm while on KP duty, that's kitchen patrol, after she put her arm against a hot pot. In the game, it's a chemical burn, but they changed it here, and I'll talk about that in a second. We see Ellie's mom's switchblade jammed into the nightstand. Also, this shot with a flowing window curtain in the background is reminiscent of the game loading screens. We see the Aha cassette tape, which is probably how Ellie learns to play Take On Me. The next morning, Ellie wakes up to find Joel annoyed over Seth misspelling Ellie's name as Eli. In the same shot of Joel going to get a knife, he turns back to see Ellie immediately nom-nom-nomming the cake. I mean, she is a post-apocalyptic kid who never grew up going to birthday parties where you would have to wait to slice the cake. I mean, Fedra in Boston wasn't getting him cakes. Joel shares his real present.
Some folks call this a guitar.
Joel makes the same joke about his Texas background in the game.
Some folks call this thing here a guitar.
This moment with Joel playing Future Days by Pearl Jam for Ellie is actually one of the very first things you see in the game part 2. But it's not Ellie's birthday in the game, it's kind of like a just cuz gift. And it's in Ellie's room, not here in the kitchen. But this episode really restructures this memory and a lot of memories as part of a string of Joel's birthday gifts for Ellie. Here, Joel says that he promised he would teach her, which we saw him do in season 1, and he sings the words of Pearl Jam's Future Days, which Ellie started to do years later in the theater last episode. And that episode, I talked about that song and how its lyrics for Joel and Ellie, their interpretations of "if I ever were to lose you, I'd surely lose myself" is a very extreme take on what it means to love someone. The shots of this scene show close-ups of Joel's fingers on the strings, and we do feel like we're getting kind of a tutorial the way this opening part of the game makes you actually strum the correct chords of the guitar. Ellie looks at Joel playing with pure love in her eyes, similar to how Dina would later look at her in the record store. When he finishes the song, Ellie says that didn't suck, the way Ellie jokes in the game, but instead of Joel promising to start lessons the next day and remembering a corny joke, Joel in this scene says this interesting line.
I understand. Your
So there are a few ways we can look at this. On one level, Joel could just be doing a little bit better than his dad did when a kid messes up. But really, I think he might be telling Ellie, if you really got burned because you might have spiraled into a dark place and had like an instinct of self-harm, hey, I understand that too. Like, as Ellie will later reveal to Joel, the idea that she could be used to make a cure did give her life some purpose. And now that we're 2 months after Salt Lake City, Ellie might have pulled a Carmine looking into the kitchen fire moment from The Bear, right? And looked at the cordyceps bumps on her arm, looked at this hot pot, and just some part of her was like, what if I could just melt this? Now look, there is a very real and a very sensitive conversation when it comes to teenagers, bandages on their arms, self-harm. I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I just thought it was very sweet of Joel to say, whatever this was, I understand. And the fact that Joel went to all this effort to fix up a guitar for Ellie's birthday and share this vulnerable moment with her reframes what we saw back in the season 2 premiere, with Joel unable to communicate with Ellie and seeing that guitar carelessly tossed aside, collecting dust, and he rushes over, offering to restring it, like trying to fix their relationship the only way he knew how, by reverting back to trying to be a father to her the way he could when things were simpler between them. Now we cut 1 year later to Joel leading Ellie through the woods for her 16th birthday, a sweet 16. In the game, you flash back to this memory when Ellie plays a bit of Future Days on the guitar in the theater in Seattle, which we saw last episode, and Ellie froze for a second, so we can assume that she was thinking back to this day. Now, this is a memory that you flash back to with Joel after Joel gets brutally murdered in the first 10% of the game, so structuring it this way in season 2 of the HBO show has the same nostalgic effect. As Ellie does in the game, she guesses what her presents are. In the game, she guesses a dinosaur first, which makes it crazy that it actually is a dino. They also keep Ellie not knowing that kittens come in a litter.
Is it a litter of kittens?
a lotter? You mean a litter?
Now, I had thought in the game that Ellie just says a lot of kittens, and Joel misheard her as thinking that the word litter was lauder and corrects her on that, and both of them are kind of confused. But unlike in the game, Joel and Ellie don't push each other in the water. One, because if they did, the cassette tape that he gives her later would be wet, but also in TV shows, there's a special bonus rate that you have to pay actors if they are dripping wet in a scene. It's called a drip rate. It became a very big thing on the set of Lost. There's also an added conversation here where Joel thinks something's going on with Jesse and Ellie, and Ellie laughs it off because despite Joel's eye for these kind of things, he says, he clearly hasn't figured out her sexual orientation. She says,
I promise you I won't get pregnant if you let me train for patrols.
yeah, Ellie knows she's gonna be able to keep this promise because she never plans to have sex with a dude. Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. Mother's Day comes around every May like clockwork. For some of us, that's no problem. But for any of you who might have a more fraught relationship with your mothers, it can be a source of significant stress and anxiety. That's the exact kind of thing therapy can help with, and BetterHelp makes starting therapy easy. Anxiety often peaks in the late springtime, but with BetterHelp, you can nip it in the bud. The majority of BetterHelp members seek support for anxiety, and 69% of members report improved anxiety symptoms after just 6 weeks of therapy. Just head to betterhelp.com/newrockstars, fill out a questionnaire, and you will match with a therapist in as little as a couple days. Easily switch therapists anytime at no extra cost if it's not the right fit. They carefully make sure therapists on the platform are well qualified, and their customer support team is there to help you if you have any questions. With over 7,000 reviews and a 4.5-star rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can trust. Let BetterHelp help you rule your anxiety so it doesn't rule you. Click the link in the description, scan the QR code, or go to betterhelp.com/newrockstars and get 10% off your first month of therapy. They find the T-Rex statue, and just as you can as Ellie in the game, Ellie here climbs up to the head of the statue, but in the game, the way you get off is by jumping into a pool of water surrounding it. Here's where we see the 2 seasons of Ellie's obsession with space travel paying off. When they were writing season 1, Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann had the benefit of part 2 of the game already being out, so they were able to add scenes to season 1, like Joel and Ellie talking about Sally ride, so that when Ellie sees those Fedra soldiers in the tank in Seattle, that she compares them to the NASA test pilots. It was just an interest years in the making. We sadly here don't get that much time of Joel and Ellie talking about the various dinosaur fossils, and Joel only really knowing what he saw in the Jurassic Park films, but we do go straight into that curvy starscape tunnel that you go through in the game into the space exhibit with the same A Path Through the Stars wall and light up solar system mobile that you crank to spin. In the game, the planets stop at Neptune because in 2013 Pluto was no longer considered a planet, but here we see all 9 through Pluto because this world ended in 2003, where Pluto was still considered a planet at that point. They arrive at the Apollo 15 landing capsule from July to August 1971. This was the 4th landing on the moon and the first use of the lunar roving vehicle. The crew was David Scott, Alfred Worden, and James Irwin. Joel tells Ellie that she needs a helmet and gives her a rock to smash a case, and she grabs the Gemini helmet. Gemini was NASA's second space program after Mercury before Apollo, and Gemini saw 2 astronauts going to space together because Ellie considers herself part of a 2-person crew. They go inside the capsule, and this is one of the sweetest moments in the game. Joel gives Ellie her birthday present, a cassette tape recording of the Apollo 11 countdown audio from Mission Control. Apollo 11 was the first crew to land on the moon. Director Matt Shakman actually used this same exact audio to get together the very first concept trailer for Marvel's Fantastic Four: First Steps, which also stars Pedro Pascal. As Ellie closes her eyes, the lighting on her face and her helmet and the outside background of the capsule shift to be the fire of the launch, with the capsule rumbling, followed by the quiet of space and the shifting light of the sun as this craft would rotate. Unbroken by Gustavo Santaolalla, the song from the game plays here, and it's just as beautiful. In the game, Ellie writes about this memory in her journal with a drawing of a space shuttle saying "one day," which is a sad but sweet sentiment from a girl who was able to get one day feeling like an astronaut on a planet where space travel is probably not going to be possible in her lifetime. As we cut back to Joel, realizing that he could give a daughter a perfect birthday, a tear has trickled from his eye. On their hike back, Ellie stops to look at something in the bushes.
You okay?
Yeah.
And what does Ellie see there? Fireflies. This perfect memory was tainted by Ellie's nagging suspicion that Joel lied to her about what really happened with Marlene's group of fireflies in Salt Lake City. So 1 year later, it's now Ellie's 17th birthday, and Joel has a chocolate cake, the flavor that Seth said would take longer, meaning Joel planned this ahead of time, and Ellie's name is spelled correctly. He thinks he's being a better dad. But then Joel hears Ellie and Kat giggling and barges in to find them putting their shirts back on. 2 years since we last saw Ellie's room, there's now more stuff on the walls. The Savage Starlight poster has been moved, and now there's a Nirvana poster with more drawings over her bed. String lights drape the room, a very 17-year-old girl thing. We also see a Thoughts 20 poster, which is a fictional band from the game. We see the Pearl Jam tour poster with Soundgarden. That was probably the 1992 Lollapalooza tour. We see a Weezer poster. We also see the poster from Radiohead's Creep. Now, this memory is not depicted in the game outright. It's kind of alluded to because we know Ellie did have a history with Kat in the game when she gave her the tattoo, but in the game, Joel did not suspect Ellie wasn't straight until he saw her with Dina at the dance. They added this, and since Kat led the patrol in season 2 episode 1 and gave that jealous look back at Ellie and Dina, we suspected a flashback scene with her would be coming. We see how Ellie got her moth tattoo on her arm to cover the area where the burn scar is and underneath where the cordyceps marks would be. This episode adds another chapter to their story to show Joel as an imperfect father, specifically someone who came from Texas when the world shut down in 2003 instead of 2013 and never lived that very important decade that saw the biggest shift in public opinion in favor of tolerance toward LGBT groups. So here, Joel ignorantly attributes this to just another teenage phase for Ellie.
Drugs and tattoos and sex, experimenting with girls?
It wasn't sex. And it wasn't a f***ing experiment.
Ellie makes it very clear to Joel that he clearly missed some signals about her orientation or chose to ignore them, and Joel again chooses to deny them.
You don't know what you're saying. We'll discuss this later when you're yourself.
And I'm not saying this to make excuses for Joel, but again, Joel with 2003 social values would be different from a Joel with 2013 social values, so he shouldn't be painted as like a perennial saint if not for what he did in Salt Lake City. Ellie plans to move into the garage, and Joel starts to echo his father, I assume by stating, "This is my house," to which Ellie shoots back that Jackson gave both of them this house, and he doesn't own anything. Yeah, dude, this is a communist community. Joel, who has come to respect Ellie, ultimately agrees, and he tells Ellie he'll fix it up for her. He asks Ellie what the moths mean to her, and she says she read about them in a book about dreams and how they're symbolic, and he thinks he knows what she's talking about.
Yeah, like change and growing and such.
Yeah, Joel's just trying to simplify this as a symbol of Ellie's changing sexuality. Again, getting it wrong. Ellie didn't change from straight to gay, she just realized what she always was. Joel finds Gale reading Earth Abides, a 1949 George R. Stewart sci-fi novel about a man named Ish who survives an outbreak that kills most of the world's population, and he starts to try to rebuild society, but one of his kids dies of typhoid, and as an old man, he realizes society will never be rebuilt as it was. This is kind of Joel's story with Ellie. He wants to have with her what he had with Sarah, but the world Ellie is growing up in is not the world that Sarah was born into. And when you give Catherine O'Hara a joke, you know she's gonna absolutely crush it.
Is there a Doctor's In sign on me like Lucy from Peanuts?
I have to say this, there is an art and joke structure about where you place the word or for rhythmic purposes, and preceding the word peanuts, which is inherently a fun word, with is just the brilliance here. Is there a Doctor is in sign on me like Lucy from Peanuts? And Gale says the dumb psychologists study dreams, but she corrects Joel, saying a moth doesn't represent change, butterflies do, but rather a moth represents death. For Ellie, it's connected to her existential dread over her life having no purpose, that she lived longer than she should have, that in a world doomed to be taken over by cordyceps fungus, she was cursed with immunity. In a room, later we do see her drawings of moths and the phrase, "You have a greater purpose." Back in Ellie's room, there is a sticker for a moon man playing a guitar, which kind of combines the first and the second birthday gifts we saw Joel give Ellie. The song playing in the scene is Longing by Gustavo Santaolalla from the Last of Us 2 game. She takes down her Savage Starlight poster and packs up her records. And of these records, we see Zamfir's The Lonely Shepherd record. This is the instrumental piece that's been used in a lot of media that you might know from Kill Bill Volume 1. The one that goes and then like guitar strums. So good. And this might be my favorite detail of the episode, because in September 2003, Kill Bill Volume 1 was just weeks away from releasing in theaters. It would have been in October 2003. Outbreak Day was September 26, 2003. But as someone who actually did own this soundtrack in 2003, as a teenage film nerd who had discovered Quentin Tarantino by watching IFC, the soundtrack actually released 2 weeks before the film did on, get this, September 23rd, 2003. 3 days before Outbreak Day. So it is possible for that soundtrack to have been frozen somewhere in malls and Sam Goodies, wherever. Someone raided some Best Buys that were left unattended and got that soundtrack and heard this great song. Yes, it had existed in other places, but I maintain that this would have been the most likely way that it got out there. And for Ellie to have picked up this record from a record store, somewhere people would have found Quentin Tarantino's eclectic mix of songs from the Volume 1 soundtrack, seen posters for this upcoming Kill Bill movie with Uma Thurman on the outside of cinemas, and wondered what the plot of that Pulp Fiction director's new big movie was gonna be, and had to guess from the soundtrack and the snippets of the movie audio that were on that soundtrack. And as a result, this Lonely Shepherd song would have been particularly popular. Look, I became who I am in the year 2003. I'm telling you, this show was made for me. So we are now 2 years later to Ellie's 19th birthday, months before the New Year's where this season began. Her garage bedroom now looks as it did at the start of the season. Ellie practices asking Joel some questions that would be nagging at her since Salt Lake City. The kind of refrigerator logic Craig Mazin has talked about on Script Notes, his screenwriting podcast that we brought up in Film Analysis when we start to realize plot holes after the fact. Ellie asks if the Fireflies spotted us a mile from the hospital, how did they get surprised by an entire group of raiders? 2, if the raiders could kill all those soldiers, and Marlene, and you had to carry me the whole time, how did you get away? Yeah, indeed, when you carry Ellie out of the hospital in part 1 of the game, you cannot use your gun, so you just have to avoid the Fireflies shooting in your direction. And 3, if there are dozens of immune people, why hasn't anyone heard of any others? 3 years after Ellie asked Joel about going on patrol with him on her Sweet 16, only now at 19 does he take her out on her first patrol. Joel stresses the importance of scanning with binoculars, and Ellie just goofs off, but she did do this when she was on patrol in season 2, episode 1. Radio dispatch says Eugene and Adam need backup. I assume it's Adam we see being dragged by his horse. They hike down the side of a cliff and they land on a soft patch of moss. The way the camera lingers, it kind of feels like some cordyceps tendrils might be down there. They find Eugene, Gale's husband, played by Joe Pantoliano, our man from The Matrix, The Sopranos, The Goonies, even the 2003 Daredevil, which also would have been in cinemas earlier in the year from Outbreak Day. We actually saw Joey Pants on this show already as Cypher on the Matrix poster in Ellie's room in the season premiere, which I love. Actually, when Eugene pulls his gun, Joel says,
"You're empty."
Which reminds me of this line from The Matrix.
You're empty. So are you.
Eugene tells him right away that he was bitten. He's not trying to be deceptive. He just asks if they'll bring him back to the gate so that he can say goodbye to Gail. Joel says no. Ellie tells Eugene to hold out his hand and count to 10, kind of like an infection DUI test that Ellie will do with Dina at the Pinnacle Theater after Dina sees Ellie get bitten. Joel tells Ellie to get the horses and meet up with him later, and Ellie stops, recognizing the look and tone on Joel's face when he had lied to her from before. So she uses this moment to test, as he says,
I promise.
Eugene says the cordyceps makes him feel cold, which he didn't expect. And when Joel leads him to a beautiful mountain view lake, Eugene realizes that this is a George and Lenny from Mice and Men situation. Joel offers to pass along his last words, but Eugene says,
I need her last words for me.
this foreshadows what Joel will need from Ellie the night before he dies. Not his last words for her, but what he needs her to say to him. The words, I'm willing to try. To hear that hope that she's willing to forgive him before he can finally let go from this world. Eugene wants Gail's face to be the last thing he sees, and Joel says,
If you love someone, you can always see their face.
and you know for Joel, he's talking about Sarah in this moment. Joe Pantoliano does this beautiful shift in his eyes as his focus shifts from the distance to a point closer to him, and he says that he sees her, and pow, the bird's clear. They drag Eugene's body behind their horses, wrapped in a tarp with a bloody spot seeping through, exactly how Joel's body will look when Ellie, Jesse, and Dina ride back from the lodge. And remember, when Joel looked at that painting of the two horses in Gail's house in season 2, episode 1, he was remembering Ellie riding up and that look of betrayal on her face, and how that led to her telling Gail the information that would make Gail hate Joel forever. Joel initially tries to lie to Gail, saying that Eugene was bit when they found him, and that he wanted to tell Gail that he loved her but didn't want to put her in danger, and that he was brave, and that he ended it himself. And Gail hugs Joel, but Ellie cannot stomach this lie.
That's not what happened. He begged to see you. He had time. Joel promised to take him to you. He promised us both. And then Joel shot him in the head.
For Ellie, it was the lie to Eugene, a lie to Gail, a lie to her, and proof that Joel lied to her years before.
You swore.
So we circle back to New Year's Eve from season 2, episode 1, now seen from Joel's perspective at the stable with Tommy and Maria. Tommy says,
See you next year.
See you next year.
now, we don't know if Tommy sees Joel the next morning because Joel goes out pretty early with Dina. So the next time Tommy sees Joel, it might be his corpse. Maria tells Uncle Grumpy that he means a lot to them, referring to their earlier conversation about, refugees to Jackson. Joel shoves Seth when he insults Ellie and Dina, and knowing that Seth was a cop and that Joel might project his feelings about his father onto Seth, it gives greater weight to Joel shoving this man down to protect a kid that he loves. Later that night, Joel plays Ellie's guitar, which he had promised her earlier that day that he'd restring. Season 2, episode 1 showed Ellie seeing Joel on this porch, but then walking past, and we thought the scene ended there because Ellie later told Gail that she never talked to Joel. But the framing of the shot has a bit of fun with that, showing Ellie walking past, then surprising us, having her re-enter the frame. What we see here is a very important scene from part 2 of the game, a memory that comes up way later down Ellie's path. Actually, I don't think it's a spoiler to say it is the final scene of the game. It's very important context that caps Joel and Ellie's relationship overall as she looks back on the night before he died. So as a player of the game, you just go through a lot more of it before you learn that those words were exchanged between them. But again, this HBO show seems to be restructuring Joel and Ellie's flashbacks from part 2 of the game into a single thematic arc. And this makes it less likely that they're gonna bring back Pedro Pascal for season 3, unless they're gonna write some new flashback scenes that we didn't see in the game. A lot of this dialogue in this scene is what Joel and Ellie say in the game. Joel is drinking from an owl mug, coffee that he got from people who came through the week before, and suggesting that he traded something valuable away to get it. And also Ellie saying that she had it under control with Seth, and Joel asking if Dina is Ellie's girlfriend, and Joel saying,
Look, I don't know what Dina's intentions are, but, well, she'd be lucky to have you.
You're such an asshole.
Ellie now says that she was supposed to die at the hospital. And here, this scene slightly adapts a different memory from Joel and Ellie in the game that begins with Ellie's target practice with Tommy. And then a little bit later into that flashback, Ellie and Joel get into what happened at the hospital, and Ellie gets some confirmation that Joel had lied about it. Now, Ellie asks Joel her questions, saying that he has one last chance to tell the truth. She asks, were there other immune people? And Joel shakes his head, no. Were there raiders? Joel shakes his head, no. She asks, could they have made a cure? And Pedro Pascal's face twists into heartbreak as he nods, yes. And Ellie asks, did you? And Joel just nods, knowing what she's gonna ask. And she goes, and Marlene? And Joel nods again. I mean, from this moment, right here, Pedro Pascal, completely Emmy worthy. Ellie says it wasn't Joel's choice if the cure would have killed her.
That was my purpose. My life would have f***ing mattered, but you took that from me. You took it from everyone.
This is a line directly from this scene of the game, as is this one.
But if somehow I had a second chance at that moment, I would do it all over again.
Yes, Joel remains unrepentant on this point, so that the next day when Abby grills him, he knows that that is his turn to pay the price. Joel tells Ellie that he loves her in ways she cannot understand, and this.
If you should ever have one of your own, I hope you do a little better than me.
Yes, he finally understands what his father told him. And no matter how good and how loving and how empathetic and how nurturing we can get as parents, this is something that we will inevitably feel, a sense of failure, shortcoming, that we're not doing enough. We have to accept that we are what they grow beyond. We will always at some point feel to some degree like failures. And we just have to pray that however good we are, they'll do better. Ellie says that she doesn't think that she can forgive Joel for this, but
I would like to try.
and that is where the scene ends in the game. And like Eugene needing to hear one thing from his wife, it's what Joel needs to hear before he goes. Since episode 5 ended with Ellie beating Nora in Seattle and flashing back to the memory of Joel on her birthday, we now come back out of this memory to where Ellie was in the present day, marching through the thunderstorm back to the theater. So is she capable of doing a little better than Joel? Is it too late? Comment down below with your thoughts on this episode, and a special thanks to one of our YouTube members, TDS on a Quest, for supporting us at the executive producer level. Follow me at EA Voss and subscribe to all 3 channels in the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.